All right, so my name is Shalom, and I am speaking on Africans and African Americans, some of the differences, some similarities, based on my personal observation and experiences living in the United States for 15 plus years. Um, I was born and raised in northern Nigeria, and these are my personal experiences. So let's see. So we were discussing some of those issues and why Africans come to the United States and sometimes have a certain perception of the opportunities not being taken advantage of by African Americans in the United States. And as I said earlier, some of those have to do with the fact that as Africans, we come in and see opportunities compared to what we've experienced and seen in our countries. And then you also have Americans who come into our countries, Nigeria, for example, and they come in with what are deemed as, goods. They come in with, a lot of aid to help people starving or schools or any of those things. And that's seen as great things by Africans. And therefore, Africans, have this high regard for a lot of white Americans due to that. Now, you don't really have a lot of African Americans that travel to certain African countries, at least in Nigeria. I haven't seen too many African Americans that have come. That also affects the relationship, when we get here. So, like I was saying before, as Africans, we come in and we don't have a history or an experience of the systematic oppression that a lot of African Americans discuss or talk about, right? And so, because of that lack of understanding, there's a lack of communication, there's a lack of understanding. Therefore, Africans don't get what African Americans are complaining about, and African Americans have this perception that Africans look down on African Americans for not taking advantage of opportunities or, being a part of complaining about a system or this, that, and the other. Now, having experienced both, I feel like I'm in a good place to discuss what I feel are the disconnects and, based on my experiences, what I feel could be some solutions. You know, as a black man living in America, I will say that it is not a place for any black person. America is not for black people. You know, um, most black Americans came in as slaves and don't know their source, their history, and that is critical to any human being. You need to know where you're from. You need to know where you're from because it helps direct and guide where you're going in life. And because of that lack of knowledge, some African Americans are, take that and try to use it against us as Africans, right? I've experienced that. Um, I've discussed some of the differences. Here are what I believe are some solutions. Okay. Um, some solutions from these are my personal opinions. More African Americans need to do more traveling to the African continent. You have different sources of, it's 2018 right now. You have different ways of discovering your history and getting to know more about you. It's a personal investment you have to make. I made an investment into learning more about Black America and the struggles of African Americans, right? And the African American history. That's not something I grew up with. I have my own history. My history in northern Nigeria is actually very different from the history in southern Nigeria itself. So we have a very different history. I'm Hausa Tangale, which is in northern Nigeria, and we have our own history. But I've taken the time to learn, um, and so that should be the same for anybody else before speaking on some of these subjects, right? So some solutions. I think that more Black Americans need to travel to the African continent to experience it. Um, DNA testing is huge right now. You have African ancestry where they give you, down to they give you down to your tribe. That could help direct your travel as well. That way, once you do discover what tribe you're from, then you can determine what countries to go to and do more research on your specific tribe, and it will give you a better sense of of meaning in life and source, right? I think a lot of what Black America struggle with right now is a sense of identity. That's a very powerful thing. So, like I said earlier, I do believe that all Black Americans living in America today are still slaves, right? Some are slaves physically, and others are slaves physically and mentally, right? Um, and I'll probably get into each one of those. But physically, you have the jail system. That is very much a systematic um, way of keeping people, Black people specifically, still in jail, because the justice system is so skewed to lock Black people up for much longer and for much lesser crimes than you would if you compared, other races, and that's just a fact. Um, the other systematic oppression that goes on, you have the mental. That's the biggest, not just for Black Americans, but for Black people all over the world. The mental fuck that has been done to Black people prior even to the slave trade, when these colonizers came in. It's really affected it's really affected people on the continent and in the diasporas. You know, Africans view America as heaven, literally. The ability to go to America is looked at as you've gone and you've seen God. So the worship of white culture in Africa is so huge and has imprisoned most people mentally. In the United States, Black people are still enslaved. I mean, you talk about 400 years of slavery plus. So, it's not by any means your fault. It's just the reality of the facts. People are still enslaved in the way they think. In my experiences with African Americans and my Black community in the United States, I see a lot of mental slavery. People, they can't think outside of this certain box, and that box represents the cell, the jail that they're imprisoned in. You know, a lot of people have a crab in a barrel mentality. In order to get ahead, they need to screw someone else over, and there is no sense of unity. Publicly it appears like there's unity because when it's time to campaign or rally around certain things or march around certain things, the Black community just show up. When you have these Know Your Rights campaigns and Time to Vote campaigns and Black Lives Matter, we rally up pretty well. However, when it comes to actions, that's where I see the Black community struggling. The Black community in America don't necessarily come together when it comes to supporting Black businesses, for example. And that leads me to what I feel is the way out. If you're not building an empire or you're not thinking that way, key thing there. You have to start thinking mentally with that kind of mindset, because in African countries, we come from empires, we come from kingdoms. That those are our backgrounds, right? And until you start thinking back to that type of mentality, then you will struggle because you'll always be held down. So, I don't find, from my experiences, I haven't found that the black community very much well supports black businesses as much as they do other businesses of other races, Asian, white, businesses, So they support more other brands outside of their own than they do their own black community. That's why the black dollar doesn't circulate within the black community much in comparison to the Asian community or the Caucasian community. Now, without money, you can't really have power. And, in order to get out of the funk and the slavery that, most black Americans are under, I find that America as a capitalist society only understands one thing, and that's money. So until you have enough money to get out of it, you're not really getting out of it. And that's money as a community. The black community spends billions of dollars, if not trillions, in the United States alone. So that monetary power, though, goes into other communities. It never stays in their own communities. That's a huge problem. I have tested out this theory many times in attempts to do business with other black people, specifically, for me, black millennials over the last few years. So I speak from specific experience. I'm not speaking out of my ass. And so when I say these things, these come from personal experiences that I can share and give examples of, right? The lack of unity when it comes to building something sustainable, something like an empire. That's the struggle. People look at Jay-Z and Beyonce and Diddy, and I still think of those people as slaves because they can't really get out of. I mean, look at Kanye West. Look at you have certain people that have done a great deal to move the black community forward as individuals, as a couple, and have built great wealth for themselves. However, when you talk about the community as a whole, yeah, they're just not there. And even when you look at every single person that attempts to help the black community in the United States, they are persecuted or dead. Those are just facts. So, and often persecuted by their own. So that's bothersome. You do have some history in the black community of great moments where there was great progress, where it seemed that black people in America were making huge steps and progressions towards making sure they built their own community, right? Case in point, Black Wall Street. Black Wall Street was a great attempt at that. And, only God knows what would have happened if it wasn't destroyed. However, I think that was a great attempt, and that those were steps in the right direction. Now, can that happen again? Yes, it can happen again to build another Black Wall Street. You see a lot of great attempts by, Dr. Boyce Watkins, someone that I respect in terms of leaders in Black America who are actually on what I feel is the right path to helping the Black community, right, in the United States. So people like that are key. I think those people should be paid attention more too. However, people don't pay attention to them as much as they should, right? People want someone else who maybe, I don't know, more charismatic, or, he's not wearing enough bling, he's not showing off his cars, nothing of that nature. And that's he shouldn't have to do those things to get the attention of Black America, right? He's speaking truth, giving tools and resources, often for free, that people should take advantage of, right? Now, there is a sense of responsibility from yourself, the responsibility to educate yourself, the responsibility to take yourself out of the system and the situations, because the options are there. The options are there. There may not be as many options for you as there are for me, but there are still options. There are still ways. I think that having lived in the United States and experienced most of the things that Black Americans do complain about and will complain about, I've gone through those myself. And so from that experience is where I give my input and my opinions on how to do, how to get past those. I think that most of Black America should just be thinking business. That's it. You should just be thinking business. How do you build your own businesses? How do you build your own empires? I discuss 5 things that I feel every human seeks, and I specifically talk about them to help and encourage, Black people in America. So, who am I? Everyone asks that question. You need to know who you are. What can I do? Where am I from? That's a key thing, and that's probably the biggest one I feel that most Black Americans need. Then you have, where am I going? And then, why am I here? Every human being, no matter of color, race, whatever, country, innately is seeking to answer those 5 questions. And those give us purpose. Those direct us in our destiny in life. So this is my attempt to hopefully open up discussions and have more conversations with other Black Americans on their experiences, my experiences. Again, I am an African immigrant into the United States, and there are perceptions on both ends, from our perceptions as Africans of African Americans and perceptions of African Americans of Africans. But the more separation happens there in those type of arguments, then the less unity there is. And one thing I will say is, Black people, we're very good at talking about unity. We're very good at talking, period. When it comes to taking action, that often to me becomes some of the challenge, which is a huge reason why I often hesitate to make these kind of videos or even have these kind of discussions, because we can have great discussions, but at the end of the day, are you patronizing my business? Am I patronizing your business? Are we putting money in each other's pockets? Are we building consortiums and conglomerates to support each other to get out of that funk? And until that's done, then talk is just talk. It's going to be going on for generations. It's going to be going on for years, where the talk just continues. However, if you want to get past the talk and actually take real good actionable steps, I have my own community where I share more of my opinions and more of my experiences and more of my insight on how to get out of the system, the system that you're in America. And so, you can go to dreamsnambition.org. That's dreams, the letter N, ambition.org. And there, I share more of my insights, I share more of my opinions, I share more of my experiences, and I give an attempt to help anybody that wants to be helped or supported, or there just needs to be a community where we can share those experiences and have honest discussions about what is actually going on, and how to get past those, right? There doesn't need to be separation between Africans and African Americans. There needs to be unity. However, that unity is not going to come without raw discussions about, you know, how Africans get treated when they come to the United States, right? There needs to be honest discussions about the reality of African American history and why it's affected their society so much the way it has today. But more importantly, how to get out of that. Because discussing the past for so much doesn't really do much. You actually have to have a plan and take actionable steps. So, yeah, dreamsnambition.org. And again, my name is Shalom, born and raised in northern Nigeria. And I lived in the United States for a long time, and have been an active member of the Black community in the United States. I have owned businesses in the United States, and currently do international marketing and distribution between my home country and other countries around the world. And hopefully my insights are helpful, and I'd love to hear from you as well. Leave me a comment, subscribe to the channel, send me an email, and let's have some good positive discussions.